Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening everybody present here. I'm extremely grateful to the Karachi Editors Club and Live Rostrum and Pakistan and the financial meeting, particularly head by Mirza Sahab, Mirza Sahab, and of course Live Rostrum being represented here by Shahid Hussain. جیسے کہ میر صاحب نے کہا کہ کراچی کے اندر جو ہلچل ہے سڑکوں پہ اس کو مسلسل رکھتے ہوئے جو لوگ یہاں پہنچ پائے ہیں اور جو آئے ہیں اور حاضر ہیں ان کا تہ دل سے میں شکریہ ادا کرنا چاہتا ہوں اور احسان مند ہوں کہ آپ نے ٹائم نکالا اور آپ اس تقریب میں حاضر ہوئے. اب جو صورتحال ہے ملک میں اس کی وجہ سے جو بزنس کمیونٹی اور مختلف ایسوسیشنز ہیں اور مختلف سرمایہ کار ہیں ان سب کے مشورے سے ہم لوگ فکر مند تھے اور پریشان تھے کہ یہ کس طرف اکانومی جا رہی ہے, کیونکہ جو چیز سننے میں آتی ہے وہ سننے میں آئی ہے ابھی تک وہ یہی ہے, وہ سنتے آ رہے ہیں ہم لوگوں کو یہی ہے کہ ملک میں سیاسی عدم استحکام یہ علامت ہے, سبب وہ یہ ہوتا ہے. اسی طرح ہم یہ سنتے آ رہے ہیں کہ بھائی ڈالر بڑھ گیا, روپیہ گر گیا, ٹماٹر آلو پیاز کی قیمتیں بڑھ گئی اور اسٹاک ایکسچینج کا دیوالیہ ہو گیا اور جو جلسے ہیں اور جلوس ہیں اور حکومتیں ہیں جو آ رہی ہیں اور جا رہی ہیں, یہ سب ہو کیسے رہا ہے, کیوں ہو رہا ہے اور اس کا حل کیا ہے. یہ ایک سرمایہ کار کے لیے, ایک بزنس مین کے لیے یہ جاننا, اس کو سمجھنا بہت ضروری ہے, کیونکہ اس کا سرمایہ لگا ہوا ہوتا ہے. اور دنیا میں جو بھی سیاست ہو رہی ہے اس وقت, گلوبل پالیٹکس از بیسڈ آن اکنامکس. بیسکلی اٹ از اکنامکس دیٹ ڈرائیوز دی countries to prosperity or to damnation. اب ان وجوہات کی بنا پہ یہ آج کا جو پروگرام ہے یا آج کا جو تقریب ہے اس میں ہم لوگوں کا اکٹھا ہونا ضروری تھا, اور میرا یہ کام تھا اس آج کی تقریب کے لیے کہ میں ایک نسخہ آپ لوگوں کی خدمت میں پیش کروں, چاہے وہ جتنا بھی کڑوا ہو یا جتنا بھی وہ ٹیڑھا ہو, مگر اس کا نسخے کا سامنے آنا ضروری اس لیے ہے کہ اس کے اوپر اگر ڈیبیٹ ہو جائے یا اس کی نفی ہو جائے یا اس کو مان لیا جائے تو اس سے کم ایک راستے کا تعین ہو سکتا ہے کہ ہمیں پڑھنا کس طرح ہے. اس ناطے سے میں نے ایک تقریر وضع کی ہے اور اس کے ساتھ ریفارمس پیکج کا ایک پرچہ ہے جو آپ لوگوں کو, آپ جب اس ہال میں داخل ہوئے تو آپ کو پیش کیا گیا ہے, وہ آپ کے پاس ان بیگس کے اندر موجود ہے. کسی بھی مسئلے کو حل کرنے کے لیے ایک تاریخی تجزیہ کرنا ضروری ہے. دوسری چیز یہ کہ ہمیں یہ بھی تعین کرنا ضروری ہے کہ ایسا ہو کیوں رہا ہے, گراؤنڈ ریالٹیز کیا ہیں اور ان کا حل کیا ہے. تو میں نے جسارت کی ہے کہ وہ کہ انگریزی میں تقریر ہے, میں نے جسارت یہ کی ہے کہ اپنی تقریر کو 3 حصوں میں نے تقسیم کیا ہے. پہلے حصے میں تاریخی پس منظر ہے, اس سے ہم لوگ سب گزر कर चुके हैं। दूसरा हिस्सा जो है वो ग्राउंड रियलिटीज़ का है कि हमारे सामने हो क्या रहा है, और तीसरा हिस्सा सॉल्यूशंस का है कि इन हालात का हल क्या है और क्या होना चाहिए। So I will now address you with my formal speech, which is in English, and my apologies, it cannot be able to because of a variety of reasons, predominantly the terminologies which are used for economics, and to also cater to the request of the English media. History. We are 3/4 of a century after the formation of Pakistan, and it is incumbent that we review the journey we have covered and the milestone we are at. Decisively, we are living in a world of colonial supremacy that internationally is gasping for breath. Now this decade, and I'll pause here just for a second, this decade is there to kick the American and European colonial supremacy in Asia. And there is absolutely no dispute about this, and we can see the signs all around us. The colonists started dividing the world way back in 1903 because the global population was beyond their control. Nation states came into being, and while a politically corrupt draftsman, they didn't even hire an architect. While a politically corrupt draftsman was there to draw lines to carve nation states, we see a planet with 183 plus countries with flags and pseudo-sovereignty. Pakistan was no exception, except that it came about based on an ideology with the vibrance of Islam. The potency and vibrance of the Islamic ideology is to equitably manage population pockets, is ingrained in the ideology to even lead the world. These nation states, so created, were designed to macro-manage the population only, although the leverage for continued colonial control was based on politically devised constitutions, demanding allegiance to a flag, or debt was and remains the hidden item on the agenda of the colonists, the pseudo-sovereign existence of nation states, keeping the colonial sway intact. Global politics, therefore, today is based on a deceptive and biased canvas of economics and nationalism. In the Pakistan scenario, our leadership in succession succumbed to the colonial agenda, and despite resistance by our Qaid, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, fell into the debt trap, compromising on our founding ideology. And this is our history and the status quo today. Now this is the historical background we are dealing with. So the ground reality is what we have to now address. The ground reality from the perspective of we business people, from the perspective of the economists, from the perspective of entrepreneurs. We look at it this way. First, our leadership in succession denied our founding ideology. That was number one. And number two, by keeping us the population that funds the government out of self-determination for our course forward, our real independence was compromised. That means the population, which is us, the people, and we are funding the government, and they. And we are doing it through direct and indirect taxes. I mean, the extent of taxes that we are reckoning with, one can safely say that a child in the womb of a mother is also paying taxes today. keep hearing political slogans that we have to increase the tax rate. I say this with great responsibility and historical evidence because the ground reality is as has been from 1958. This can be referred to as a coup by the servants of the people against the people. The four basic institutions of the state, i.e. the judiciary, the armed forces, the civil bureaucracy and the parliamentarians, are huddled into a league to structure governance reliant upon an ideologically opposed constitution and the buzzword democracy to keep us, the people, gagged. Nation states that have risen to have a sway among the communities of nations, higher governments that serve the people and not rule them. We unfortunately have had rulers and a deceptive bunch that hide behind the Constitution and so-called democracy to legitimize our pro-colonial status quo. What they evidently have done to usurp this position as rulers instead of being servants has been dividing the country's population into ethnic, parochial, provincial, and religious captive political constituencies for creating their choice of political leadership that can keep us, the people, gagged and enslaved. This is why we hear the term electable. This multifarious and nefarious polarization of society has sadly kept the attention of the population on a constant stage political drama of unending slander, whilst the true power center for policy rests behind a smoke screen. This institutional deception has further entrenched itself by laws on subversion, contempt, sedition, and the primacy of the parliament, to keep audit and inquisition of the people out of their hair. Let me explain this. I mean, if you take the four institutions of the state, you take the judiciary, you take the armed forces, you take the civil bureaucracy, and you take all the parliamentarians. What is happening is that all of them are almost free of audit. It's our money, it's the taxpayers' money which is funding them. And they're all free of audit. And you cannot question their deeds, you cannot question what they're doing, even if they're doing something wrong. Because they have already got the parliament to enact laws on subversion. That means if you criticize the army, you can go behind bars for subversion. You criticize the judiciary, they'll take you in for contempt. You criticize the civil bureaucracy, they'll take you in on sedition. And similarly, if you, God forbid, criticize a member of the parliament, he'll either kill you or, because he belongs to a captive constituency, he is supposed to be the ruler of your area and you are supposed to vote for him, irrespective of whether you like it or not. You don't. So we are living in pockets of, like in a monarchy, we are living in pockets where you have people having captive constituencies, and that is why you have electables in this country. And this is a problem. And because it's a problem, it's being raised in this particular reality of the ground. This is the reality of the ground where slavery of 222 million people has been induced to submit and remain subservient to the colonist agenda globally. Through the lens of an economic periscope, we can evidently see that starting from the president of Pakistan down to a janitor at KFC, there are about 2.6 million stage actors on the payroll of us, the people, who are 222 million plus. These 2.6 million cover the judiciary, the armed forces, the civil bureaucracy, and the parliamentarians. When we examine the budget, and this is forensic, when we examine the budget, we see that 82% is being spent on them, 2.6 million people, and for us, the 222 million, only 18% is on the table. This is the evidence of a grand heist, and the actors in our national saga that were and remain are all recorded in the annals of our glorious history. The slanderous political drama, जिसको उर्दू में आप नौसरबाजों की नौटंकी कह सकते हैं, the slanderous political drama we see to the detriment of our economy is for keeping our eyeballs glued to this nonsense, while the fiddle remains intact for the retention of a status quo of colonial subservience. We the people have suffered and seemingly are being pushed to keep suffering. This entire gathering, in any case, is in our defense, in the defense of 222 million people, not the 2.6 million that are fiddling around. This nonsense, however, is unacceptable to us because of the following reasons. Number one, the status of all these four institutions is that of servants working on a defined job description at the pleasure and cost of us the people, and this is being denied. Point two, the current structure of governance is against our founding ideology and the Constitution that warrants unity and not divisions. Social fragmentation. This is also being denied. Next, borrowing or interest is waging war against Allah that cannot be thrust on 222 million people by a handful of about 1,000 odd bureaucrats from the four above mentioned institutions. And finally, our natural resources are being scavenged by alien takers while our national wealth is depleting to a point of bankruptcy. We are a rich country for both natural resources and human resources beyond any question of doubt. These are the realities of the ground. And based on these realities and the history, we have to now view some sort of a solution. And the solution will never come from these people. The solution will have to come from us, the people, the taxpayers, the business community, the entrepreneurs, the investors in this economy. In my humble submission, the solution simply put as our demand is to revert to our ideology. And ideology is very, very, very significant. Let me explain this. Let's take China. I mean, what you see as communist China, which came about in 1948, a year after us, has stuck to their ideology of communism, although it is evolving. And today you see China as a superpower, beyond any question of doubt, and a leader in the field of economics in Asia. Let's take Israel, which was a military outpost for the white man's club in the Middle East. And they have engineered an ideology which they want to stick to for expansion and for their existence. And the entire Muslim countries around it can do nothing about it. In the US itself, they are based on an ideology of capitalism. In the ex-Soviet Union, which subscribed to socialism. And when we are founded, and we were founded on the basis of the Islamic ideology, I don't see any reason why we do not stick to it, because that provides us the strength. And I have a chart available for you, which I'll explain shortly, on the fishbone structure, establishing for you the significance of aligning ourselves to an ideology. And mind you, not, before I proceed further, must not be linked to the ideology of what we assign to clerics. It is Allah's ideology, not the mullah's ideology. So there is a distinction, a clear distinction. The ground reality being what it is, the situation is unacceptable because it is carrying us Muslims into a death trap of permanent slavery of the colonists. The actors in this saga upholding the status quo must be evicted, as they are only our servants and not divine appointees of Allah to consign us to the hell of life. The solution can never come from them, as they are not stakeholders as they like to be referred to, but have become an armed profit-taking cult. We, the tax-paying population, must mandate the institutions of the government for their job descriptions, and these are based on viewpoints in consonance with the ideology as follows. Number one, the establishment as the guarantor, upholder, and protector of our sovereignty must be embodied and be constituted under a president, with the heads of all institutions of the state as members, strictly to protect any breach of our ideology in legislation and our operational management of the state. One institution cannot be referred to as the establishment because it invalidates all others. And we have seen this happen for the last 7 decades. To end legislation based on dichotomous laws, we must revert to our founding ideology for all liberties, permissible limits, and constraints as are provided by Allah in place of what is invoked, induced, and upheld by us, on us, by the colonists and the notorious agents within us to uphold their agenda. To end the global replication of the colonist model for management of population in our society, which presents a contrary model to that of the Ummah, we need to invoke land management by creating 3,400 urban municipal companies or units in the country for applying the population as a basis for a new socio-political canvas and consequent tax heads. All other land must be demarcated into industrial, agricultural, mining, touristic sites, with space for essential areas like roads, canals, and defense needs. We need to corporatize Pakistan, duly regulated at all levels for standards and processes. Towards, the 3,400 figure comes from a time when I drafted the tourism policy for this country in 1989, and I had to interact with the Surveyor General of Pakistan, and we figured that the entire population of Pakistan is located in 3,400 population pockets. And of what I have seen in China, for instance, they have managed to inhabit about 500 million people in the west of China based on urbanization. And that is a modern miracle. And this can happen in Pakistan with 222 million people very easily, and can also provide an upgrade to the population on all counts, including literacy and financial, fiscal decentralization. Towards freedom of our subservience to the financial slavery of the colonists, we absolutely must revert to our ideology and must choose a tangible medium, trade and saving. An alien printed paper is decisively against our ideology and common sense. The rupee must be linked to gold, and our 1 paisa must be revalued at 1 milligram of gold. Alien paper is alien dominance. Gold has to be free from the clutches of the bureaucracy and open for free export and import on the analogy of Singapore. The trade imbalance has to be settled in gold and not alien currencies. This will plow back the informal wealth into our economy, and the rupee can be contained within our borders as a domestic medium of exchange. Balance of trade and trading has to be in gold settlements. The dictates of the donors to tax essential items that support production is disregarded instantly. They come and tell you to tax fuel. They come and tell you to tax people. They come and tell you things which are absolutely ridiculous because it kills our ability to produce, it kills our production levels, and it kills the incentive for future investments in the country. It is absolutely unacceptable. Institutions like the World Bank, the IMF, the IBRD, the Asian Development Bank, etc., with all due respect to Sir Raj sitting here being a banker, they are colonial tools that have plagued the country for 7 decades, and we really don't want to see them, meet them, or have anything to do with them. I'll tell you one thing with great confidence, that this economy and the people are rich enough to settle their 130, 140 billion outstanding dollars in a hiccup. Next, towards strengthening our ability to counter the communist threat for departing from their dragnet, our armed forces and all other institutions must be reinforced in their own rights, and in tandem, production without reservations must be opened free of bureaucratic interference with the private sector. Today, the bureaucracy has got in its clutches every facet of the economy. So let's get out of it. These are not profit centers for them. It is not their business. The current scenario is the captivity of enterprise by the bureaucracy and their mentors, the politicians. Indigenous defense capability is at the root and crux of our dilemma for survival. The solution rests with the private sector, as did the creation of the atom bomb for Pakistan. Let's not forget that. When the atom bomb had to be created for Pakistan, it was Agha Sanabdi and Sayyid Abid perhaps, and a few others who were instrumental in making this happen. It was not any of our institutional bureaucrats. The cleansing of the country from the syndrome of debt needs to be tendered out in exchange of building contracts of our 3,400 cities at the front end of technology, of material technology. We must let foreign contractors in collaboration with domestic engineers build our infrastructure based on their taking reciprocating debt from us. The spiral generation of consequent production will ignite our industrial base, and consequent exports to debt service without river. These development contracts over 25 years at no more than $10 billion per year, or its worth in gold. In 2017, the Chinese government proposed, through us, or through me if you like, as head of the private sector delegation visiting China, that we will urbanize all 3,400 pockets because we got surplus liquidity and we got surplus production. And we will take your debt in its totality, and at that particular point in time, the debt was 83 billion. Today, it has gone past 110 or 120 billion. The top brass at that time refused on 2 grounds. One, that they didn't want to give the entire contract to China. two, that they did not want to finish their hold on the population. And to me personally, it irked me and it still bothers me because the mindset is completely corrupted and deformed. The social reforms post-urbanization will see the demise of captive political constituencies and in tandem see a debt-free Pakistan. It will also see the ignition of hyper-industrialization for a population with a buying power. I will pause here to introduce to you the fishbone structure on the chart here and explain the concept. Now, I mean, a nation state has to be just like any product. So in the Pakistan scenario, what has been proposed is that you stick to your ideology. That is the fish cake. You brand it. So for a product where you want to sell some toothpaste or some mouthwash or something of that nature, what you do is you first go for the USP, selling point, then you go for branding, and then you go for marketing. So in the country scenario, if you have an ideology, then you have your legislation on that basis, you have your social contract on that basis. But if you need to determine your revenue stream, that comes from urbanization. This is what primarily has been proposed. And if you link your medium of exchange to gold, and today your prices will drop down instantly. That means you can settle your debt for 182 tons of gold. And your dollar will be $5.18 to 1 rupee. And the donors can do nothing about it, the IMF can do nothing about it. And the model can be replicated in the Commonwealth of Jordan. So if we brand it and we stick to this and we identify our revenue stream, we have a product which will sell in the Muslim world and in the world which has been oppressed by the colonists beautifully. Point 7. Our dependency on Europe and the US as export markets is a misnomer and guarantee a deformed balance of payment roadmap. In consonance with our ideology, the Muslim markets must be made duty-free for imports and exports of all commodities, travel and investment. Because this is our Commonwealth. Our Commonwealth is not anywhere else. You open your doors to them. You don't need to go to Europe, you don't need to go to America, you don't need to have a dependency status. We must allow institutions to rise in their leadership, to raise their leadership and independently from within themselves so they are internally audited and misconducts and they remain free from political bias. And if you want me to explain this any further, what I'm trying to basically say that if you hypothetically have the judiciary and you have the civil bureaucracy and you have the armed forces, let them choose their own leaders. The job of an elected government is to run the government based on your ideology and by the development of consensus with the institutions. The management of the government by the representatives of the people will only need to work on consensus building, development to achieve national targets marked and sealed by the ideological firm moorings. Point 9. No political force must exist that are not democratic within. They cannot come in the visage of being a democratic force when they don't practice democracy within their own ranks. 10. Finally, all land must be owned by one agency of the federal government and demarcated to house corporate urbanization, corporate farming, corporate mining and tourism as per the dossier circulated for all our very honored guests present here. This is to end the land grabbing nuisance in the country and culturally alter the feudal mindset. I have distributed this reforms package for you to read and reflect upon. I rest my case and will be pleased to take questions as may arise in your minds. Our announcement was necessary because our national ship is adrift, and this time around we are in a whirlpool with no land in sight. The army cannot save you, nor can America. Global politics is based on economics, so free the economy from the bureaucratic clutches and the economy will save Pakistan. Inshallah. Pakistan.